Welcome everyone to this week's Journal Club. Today I will present Pharmacy Benefit Managers History, Business Practices, Economics, and Policy. My name is James Wren. I am a data scientist with the Center for Health Services Research at the Uniformed Services University. This is an interesting topic that I think doesn't get a lot of attention, and my hope today is that you'll walk away with a better understanding of what pharmacy benefits managers are, the role they play, and what I think are some very important legal cases for all parties involved. Hopefully you all had the opportunity to read through the paper. If you didn't, don't worry. My goal is to run you through a brief summary of it so that we can get to some of the more interesting ongoing legal cases and leave enough time at the end for questions and discussion. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into a crucial but often misunderstood part of the healthcare system, pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs for short. We'll explore their role in the pharmaceutical supply chain, their history, business practices, and the increasing scrutiny they face from policymakers. We'll also look at the legal battles and market disruptions shaping their future. Let's get started. Let's start with the basics. Pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, are third-party administrators that manage prescription drug benefits on behalf of insurance companies, employers, and government health programs. They are responsible for designing drug formularies, negotiating drug prices, and managing networks of pharmacies. PBMs were originally created to help process prescription claims and control drug costs. But over time, they have evolved into powerful entities that influence almost every aspect of prescription drug pricing and access in the United States. While their intended goal is to reduce prescription drug costs for insurers and employers, their business practices have sparked controversy, especially regarding transparency, pricing, and market competition. PBMs act as the middlemen in the pharmaceutical supply chain. They sit between drug manufacturers, who produce medications, wholesalers, who distribute drugs to pharmacies, who dispense medications to patients, insurance companies, who provide prescription drug coverage, and employers, who sponsor health insurance plans for employees. PBMs play a key role in determining how prescription drugs move through this supply chain. Business supply chain. They negotiate drug prices with manufacturers, decide which drugs will be included in insurance plans, and determine how much pharmacies will be reimbursed for dispensing medications. PBMs negotiate rebates and discounts with pharmaceutical manufacturers. In exchange for placing a drug on a preferred formulary tier, manufacturers provide PBMs with rebates. While these discounts can lower costs for insurers, there is concern that PBMs prioritize drugs with high rebates rather than the most cost-effective medications for patients. PBMs influence which drugs are purchased from wholesalers by determining the formulary. While they do not directly interact with wholesalers, their formulary decisions impact which drugs pharmacies order from wholesalers. PBMs create and manage pharmacy networks. They decide which pharmacies patients can use under their insurance plan and negotiate reimbursement rates for dispensing medications. Many PBMs also own mail-order or specialty pharmacies, creating potential conflicts of interest. PBMs work with insurers and employers to manage prescription drug benefits. They determine drug coverage policies, set copayment amounts, and implement cost-saving strategies like step therapy and prior authorization. We will talk about what step therapy and prior authorization are a little later in the lecture. For now, you have a pretty decent understanding of what PBMs are and how they're supposed to work. Let's go back a bit and talk about some history, and then we can understand what we are dealing with today. Before PBMs, prescription drug pricing was relatively simple. Patients paid pharmacies directly for their medications. At the turn of the century, the pharmaceutical industry grew, drug costs began to rise, and more Americans started relying on health insurance to cover their medical expenses, including prescription drugs. The introduction of employer-sponsored health insurance in the mid-20th century led to the need for an intermediary to process claims and manage drug benefits. PBMs emerged as a solution to control costs, standardize reimbursement, and streamline drug distribution. But before we get into their formation, let's take a look at early prescription drug regulations that shaped the industry. The regulation of prescription drugs began over a century ago. Two key legislative acts set the foundation for the modern pharmaceutical industry. The Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914, first major U.S. law regulating drugs, initially focused on controlling opiates and cocaine by requiring prescriptions for their use. This law marked the beginning of prescription drug regulation in the U.S. The Durham-Humphrey Amendment of 1951 created a clear distinction between prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs, required certain drugs to be dispensed only with a doctor's prescription, established the role of pharmacists as intermediaries in medication distribution. These early regulations set the stage for more structured drug distribution and pricing models. However, they did not yet address the issue of drug cost and reimbursement, which became a growing concern in the 1960s. As healthcare advanced, prescription drugs became an essential part of medical treatment. However, paying for medications out of pocket became a financial burden for many Americans. The 1960s saw the rapid expansion of employer-sponsored health insurance, and with it, the demand for prescription drug coverage. Before the 1960s, only about 4% of prescription drugs were covered by insurance. By 1980, that number had risen to 32%. Insurance companies needed a way to process drug claims efficiently and control prescription drug spending. With this shift, the need for an organization to manage drug benefits, negotiate prices, and process claims became evident. This led to the birth of pharmacy benefit managers. Now let's look at the early PBMs that emerged in response to these growing needs. One of the first known PBMs, Prescription Services, Inc., founded in Canada, created as a prepayment plan for prescription drugs, helped establish cost control strategies and standardized reimbursement, demonstrated that a centralized system could streamline prescription processing. This early model laid the foundation for similar companies to form in the U.S. in the following decade. The first major U.S.-based PBM was PAID Prescriptions. Founded in 1965, PAID revolutionized the way prescription drug claims were handled, initially focused on reimbursing pharmacies at their usual cash price. By 1968, PAID began setting its own reimbursement rates, giving it greater control over drug pricing. Was one of the first PBMs to develop a pharmacy network, creating a structured relationship between insurers and pharmacies. At the time, PAID Prescriptions was controversial, as many pharmacists resisted the shift in control over pricing and reimbursement. Despite the pushback, its model gained traction and set the stage for the growth of the PBM industry. By the late 1960s, the demand for prescription drug benefit management was increasing. In 1969, another significant PBM was established, the Pharmaceutical Card System, PCS, founded to process claims electronically rather than through manual paperwork, charged a small fee per claim instead of relying on reimbursement differentials, represented a major step in automating prescription drug claims, improving efficiency, and reducing administrative costs. PCS played a crucial role in the digital transformation of the industry, making it easier for insurers, pharmacies, and employers to process drug benefits more efficiently. PBMs emerged as intermediaries in the pharmaceutical supply chain, initially focused on processing drug claims. Over the decades, their role expanded significantly due to market consolidation, driven by two primary forms of integration: horizontal integration and vertical integration. Horizontal integration is when companies in the same industry merge to reduce competition and gain a larger market share, and can be demonstrated by mergers between large PBMs to expand their control over prescription drug claims. The impact of horizontal integration has led to fewer PBMs controlling a larger portion of the market, decreasing competition. Vertical integration is when companies expand their operations by acquiring businesses at different stages of the supply chain, and can be demonstrated when PBMs acquire pharmacies, insurance companies, and pharmaceutical manufacturers. The impact of vertical integration has led to increased PBM influence over pricing, reimbursement, and drug access, raising concerns over market fairness. Over the past few decades, 5 major acquisitions fundamentally altered the PBM industry. Each of these deals contributed to the consolidation of market power, reducing the number of PBMs and increasing their influence over drug pricing and patient access. In 1972, McKesson acquires PCS, which marks the beginning of vertical integration. The significance of this was the first major case of vertical integration in the PBM industry. McKesson, a wholesale drug distributor, acquired PCS Health Systems, a PBM, creating a direct link between drug distribution and PBM services. This integration allowed McKesson to control both drug distribution and reimbursement, setting a precedent for future PBM acquisitions. The impact this had on the market gave PBMs greater negotiating power over pharmacies, created the foundation for PBMs influencing drug pricing by aligning them with wholesalers, and led to other wholesalers and insurers considering similar business models. In 1993, Merck & Co. acquires Medco, which was significant that this was one of the first cases of a drug manufacturer acquiring a PBM, raising concerns over conflicts of interest. Merck, a major pharmaceutical company, gained control over Medco, one of the largest PBMs, allowing it to prioritize its own drugs in Medco's formulary. This raised questions about whether PBMs could remain neutral in drug selection, prompted concerns that Merck drugs might receive preferential treatment, impacting competition, and sparked regulatory scrutiny, leading to the eventual spin-off of Medco in 2003. In 2007, CVS acquired Caremark, and this marked a major retail pharmacy chain acquiring a PBM, leading to vertical integration between drug dispensing and drug benefit management. CVS, already a leading pharmacy, gained control over prescription benefit management, increasing its influence over the entire medication supply chain. This allowed CVS to direct more patients toward its own pharmacies instead of independent pharmacies, and gave CVS increased leverage in drug price negotiations, consolidating power. This encouraged further vertical integration, leading other major PBMs and insurers to consider similar moves. In 2012, Express Scripts acquires Medco. This was a horizontal integration of two of the largest PBMs, creating a dominant player in the market. Express Scripts, already a major PBM, absorbed Medco, significantly reducing competition in the industry. This created the largest PBM in the U.S. at the time, controlling nearly 35% of all prescriptions, which further weakened independent pharmacies, forcing many out of business, and led to greater scrutiny from lawmakers and regulators, as the merger reduced competition. In 2018, CVS acquires Aetna and Cigna merges with Express Scripts. These two major deals represented the final stage of vertical integration, merging PBMs with major health insurance companies. CVS acquired Aetna, a leading health insurer, creating a company that controlled both insurance and PBM services. Cigna, another top insurer, merged with Express Scripts, mirroring the CVS-Aetna model. The impact on the market reduced the number of independent PBMs, further concentrating power within a few corporations, and gave insurers direct control over drug pricing and access, impacting competition, which led to regulatory concerns over the potential for anti-competitive pricing strategies. With these mergers, the number of PBMs drastically declined. There were hundreds of PBMs, but today just 3 companies, CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, Cigna, and Optum Rx, control nearly 79% of the market. With the consolidation of both horizontal and vertical integration, the impact on drug prices and patient costs can be felt in 4 key ways. First, there is reduced competition. With fewer PBMs competing, there is less incentive to pass savings to consumers. Second, there are higher out-of-pocket costs. Patients often face higher copays and deductibles, as PBMs prioritize their own profit margins. Third, PBMs who own mail-order or brick-and-mortar pharmacies steer their clients to preferred pharmacies. PBMs favor their own affiliated pharmacies, limiting patient choice. Fourth, there is a complete lack of transparency. Patients and even insurers often do not know the actual cost of medications due to complex rebate structures. The net effect of consolidation is that patients are paying more for medications, while PBMs continue to increase their profits. This raises concerns about whether regulation should be put in place to ensure fair pricing and market competition. PBMs provide key services: formulary design, utilization management, drug price negotiation, pharmacy network formation, and mail-order pharmacy services. We will examine how PBMs determine which drugs are covered, how they influence prescribing decisions through tiered pricing, and how they negotiate drug costs. Additionally, we will discuss how PBMs establish and maintain pharmacy networks, including the impact of mail-order pharmacies on cost efficiency and patient convenience. Let's begin by understanding the concept of formulary design. A formulary is a list of prescription medications that a PBM covers under a specific insurance plan. PBMs are responsible for designing and managing formularies, which dictate which drugs are available to patients and at what cost. Formularies are developed based on medical guidelines, cost effectiveness, and negotiations with drug manufacturers. PBMs work with pharmacy and therapeutics (P&T) committees, composed of physicians and pharmacists, to evaluate clinical evidence, safety, and pricing before determining which drugs to include. There are 2 types of formularies: open formularies and closed formularies. Open formulary covers most prescription drugs with few restrictions. Closed formulary covers only a specific set of medications, requiring patients to use preferred drugs unless an exception is granted. Formulary design has a significant impact on multiple stakeholders, including: for patients, it determines which medications are covered and how much they will pay out of pocket. For physicians, it influences which drugs they prescribe based on formulary restrictions and cost sharing. For pharmacies, it affects which medications they stock and how they are reimbursed. For insurance companies and employers, it helps control drug spending by encouraging cost-effective prescribing. For pharmaceutical manufacturers, it impacts drug sales based on whether their medications are included or excluded from a formulary. By determining drug coverage and pricing, PBMs wield significant influence over medication access and affordability. PBMs evaluate multiple factors when deciding which drugs to include in a formulary and how to price them. These factors include clinical efficacy and safety. Drugs must meet safety and effectiveness standards based on clinical trials and FDA approval. Cost effectiveness. PBMs compare the price and benefits of different medications within the same therapeutic category. Manufacturer rebates and discounts. Drug manufacturers negotiate pricing and offer rebates in exchange for favorable formulary placement. Market demand and availability. PBMs assess the availability of generics, biosimilars, and alternative treatment options. Insurance plan preferences. Employers and insurers may prioritize lower-cost drugs to control overall healthcare expenses. This process allows PBMs to manage drug costs while ensuring that patients receive effective treatment. What is tiered pricing? Tiered pricing is a cost control strategy used by PBMs to categorize medications into different pricing levels. This structure encourages patients to use lower-cost alternatives while still providing access to higher-cost drugs when necessary. These tiers can be represented by classifying drugs into preferred generic, non-preferred generic, preferred brand, non-preferred brand, and specialty drugs. This tiered pricing model influences prescribing behavior by encouraging the use of lower-cost, preferred medications. For lower tiers, generic and preferred brands, PBMs offer lower copays and minimal restrictions, making these drugs more attractive to prescribers and patients. For higher tiers, non-preferred and specialty drugs, PBMs impose higher out-of-pocket costs and additional restrictions, e.g., prior authorization, to limit usage. Additionally, PBMs help establish rebate-based placements. PBMs negotiate rebates with manufacturers, favoring drugs that provide better financial incentives. These strategies ultimately steer patients and providers toward cost-effective treatment options. What is utilization management? Utilization management refers to PBM policies designed to ensure appropriate medication use while controlling costs. These include prior authorization, step therapy, and dosage and quantity restrictions. Prior authorization requires prescribers to obtain approval before certain drugs are covered. For example, a doctor must justify prescribing an expensive biologic before approval is granted. Step therapy requires patients to try lower-cost alternatives before moving to higher-cost medications. For example, a patient with arthritis must first try a generic NSAID before receiving approval for a specialty drug like Humira. Dosage and quantity restrictions sets limits on the amount of medication dispensed to prevent overuse or abuse. Opioid prescriptions may have a 7-day supply limit to reduce addiction risks such as overdose or the unlicensed selling of medication. These measures help PBMs control spending while ensuring appropriate medication use. How does a PBM negotiate drug prices? PBMs negotiate drug prices by leveraging their purchasing power to secure cost reductions from manufacturers and pharmacies. These strategies include rebate and discount negotiations, competitive bidding, and pharmacy reimbursement negotiations. For rebate and discount negotiations, PBMs demand rebates in exchange for favorable formulary placement. PBMs negotiate these rebates with drug manufacturers to reduce overall drug costs. However, these savings may not always be passed directly to patients. Drug manufacturers offer rebates to encourage PBMs to place their medications on a preferred formulary tier, making them more accessible to patients. Medications that offer higher rebates are often placed in a preferred tier, meaning they require a lower patient copay or fewer restrictions. Drugs with lower or no rebates may be placed in higher tiers, making them more expensive or subject to utilization management restrictions, like step therapy. After a prescription is filled, the PBM collects the agreed-upon rebate amount from the drug manufacturer. The rebate can be retained partially or fully by the PBM, or shared with insurers/employers who contract with the PBM. While rebates lower the cost for insurance companies and PBMs, patients do not always benefit directly. List prices of drugs can be artificially inflated to account for the rebate system, meaning patients who pay out of pocket or have high deductibles may see higher costs. Some policymakers argue that the lack of transparency in rebate distribution keeps drug prices high. Additionally, PBMs can utilize pharmacy reimbursement negotiations. PBMs set reimbursement rates, determining how much pharmacies are paid for dispensing medications. Pharmacy reimbursement negotiations are a critical aspect of PBM operations, as they directly impact pharmacy revenue, drug pricing, and patient access to medications. Pharmacies agree to accept PBM-negotiated reimbursement rates in exchange for being included in the PBM's preferred network, ensuring access to a larger patient base. Pharmacies are reimbursed based on these predetermined pricing formulas, often with additional dispensing fees. In some contracts, PBMs pay pharmacies a lower reimbursement rate than what they charge insurers or employers, keeping the difference as profit. This practice, known as spread pricing, has led to controversy and regulatory scrutiny because it reduces pharmacy profit margins and may increase costs for plan sponsors. PBMs sometimes impose retroactive direct and indirect remuneration (DIR) fees on pharmacies, reducing their final reimbursement after the drug has already been dispensed. For example, a pharmacy is initially reimbursed $50 for a medication, but a $5 DIR fee is later deducted, reducing the final payment to $45. These fees create financial uncertainty for pharmacies, particularly small, independent businesses. For smaller pharmacies not held under the same company, PBMs can offer lower reimbursement rates, which can threaten the viability of independent pharmacies. And for PBM-owned pharmacies, they may receive higher reimbursements for themselves, creating an uneven playing field. Lastly, another strategy for PBMs to negotiate prices is competitive bidding. PBMs pit drug manufacturers against each other to drive down prices. These processes directly impact the final cost patients pay for prescriptions. On to PBM pharmacy networks. PBMs establish networks of retail and mail-order pharmacies to ensure broad patient access to prescription medications. PBM network formation includes contracting with national and independent pharmacies to provide in-network coverage, setting reimbursement rates for brand name and generic medications, and lastly, offering mail-order pharmacy services to improve long-term medication adherence. These pharmacy networks create competitive pricing, but can also limit patient choice by steering them toward PBM-owned pharmacies. Mail-order pharmacies, often operated by PBMs, offer long-term medication delivery directly to patients' homes. There are benefits of mail-order pharmacies: cost efficiency. Bulk dispensing lowers costs compared to retail pharmacies. Convenience. Patients receive medications at home, reducing trips to the pharmacy. Improved adherence. Automatic refills help patients stay on track with chronic medications. While mail-order services offer advantages, they also raise concerns about competition, as PBMs often prioritize their own pharmacy services over independent pharmacies. How it works. Under the rebate retention model, PBMs negotiate rebates with drug manufacturers in exchange for placing specific drugs on preferred formulary tiers. These rebates reduce the price insurers pay for medications, but they are not always passed directly to patients. PBMs retain a portion of the rebate or share it with insurers, also sometimes themselves, depending on the contract. There are some potential benefits to patients. It can reduce overall drug costs for insurers, which can lower insurance premiums, and it can encourage manufacturers to compete for formulary placement, potentially driving down costs. But if left unchecked, it also has negative effects and can cost patients. Rebate retention does not always lower out-of-pocket costs. Often patients may still pay a percentage of the drug's pre-rebate price. This creates a perverse incentive to favor higher-priced drugs with larger rebates, leading to higher list prices overall. Patients with high deductibles or coinsurance plans often pay more because rebates are not applied at the point of sale. Think of it like you're buying a TV. The distributor negotiates the purchase price from the manufacturer, $50 per TV, and agrees to sell the TV on a Memorial Day sale with a special mail-in rebate of $200 on a $600 TV, 30% off sticker price. If they increase the price of the TV to $800 and offer a rebate of $400, 50% off sticker price, because they also own the store the TV is sold at. In both situations, they keep the rebate for themselves, but in the second price, they keep an even higher rebate, and the consumer is still stuck overpaying for the TV. The deal looks great on paper and as advertised, but the fine print shows just how it isn't really that great of a deal at all. Let's talk about how PBMs make money on spread pricing. PBMs charge insurers or employers a fixed amount per prescription, $15, but pay pharmacies a lower amount, $12, and keep the difference, spread, $3, as profit. This hidden markup allows PBMs to profit off each transaction, even without direct rebates. That doesn't mean that they can't also stack preferred rebates on the drug as well. Spread pricing does have potential positive aspects for patients. It can provide predictability in drug pricing for insurers and employers, and it can help maintain pharmacy network stability, ensuring access to medications. But often it can have negative effects. Spread pricing can result in higher direct fees for employers or insurers, potentially increasing premiums. PBMs may still find ways to negotiate back-end revenue streams that reduce transparency. Let's talk about an example of administrative fee contracts in action. Say, a PBM charges an insurer $5 per prescription to process claims and manage the formulary. They even sweeten the deal by saying there are no rebate retention or spread pricing costs. The drug costs are based solely on negotiated prices. In this situation, the patient may see lower drug costs but higher insurance fees and premiums. Let's break down why PBMs favor high list price/high rebate drugs. PBMs are financially incentivized to place high rebate drugs in preferred formulary positions. Two equivalent drugs may be placed in the preferred tier and non-preferred tier, with the more expensive drug listed in the preferred tier because at the increased cost, it offers a high rebate and a larger return to the PBM. Drug manufacturers increase list prices, artificially increasing the cost of their drugs in order to offer larger rebates. The larger that sticker price, the greater the deal is, right? Similar to the example from earlier, say the TV manufacturer now sells that TV for $200 instead of $50. Well, if the distributor knows they can increase the price to $1,500 and now offer a $750 rebate, 50% off sticker price, as compared to a $400 rebate, 50% off sticker price. Same rebate percentage but even greater savings, right? Wrong. The consumer is still getting the same TV as before, except the same TV that is cheaper is the non-preferred TV. Increased manufacturing cost ensures favorable formulary placement. Patients end up paying higher out-of-pocket costs due to inflated list prices. Cheaper alternatives are often excluded from the formulary in favor of rebate-heavy drugs. They can be non-preferred, listed as requiring step therapy before being authorized to use the equivalent alternative, or listed as specialty requiring authorization prior to use. In these situations, transparency is limited, making it difficult for consumers to understand drug pricing altogether. What about the impact of lack of competition? PBMs have merged with insurance companies and pharmacies, creating vertically integrated healthcare giants and given them a competitive advantage in eliminating independent PBMs, further reducing market competition. PBM-owned pharmacies receive preferential reimbursement, forcing independent pharmacies out of business. This creates limited patient choice, steering customers to PBM-owned pharmacy chains. Insurance plans may restrict drug coverage, forcing patients onto specific medications dictated by PBM-owned formularies that favor high-list price/high rebate drugs. All of this increases drug prices due to lack of competition, making prescription medications less affordable. One of the most pressing concerns regarding PBMs is market concentration and the lack of competition within the industry. 79% of all prescription drug claims in the United States are controlled by 3 PBMs: CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and Optum Rx. 96% is controlled by 6 PBMs. This level of consolidation has created a system where independent pharmacies struggle to compete. Drug prices are not subject to competitive pressure, and there has been increased regulatory concerns. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, launched an investigation in 2022 into PBM practices, citing concerns about anti-competitive behavior. PBMs dictate the terms. These terms do not always align with cost-saving strategies for patients, insurers, or even the well-being of anyone on the receiving end. The practice of favoring high-list price/high rebate drugs results in 2 key consequences. Patients end up paying more at the pharmacy counter because copays and coinsurance are based on inflated list prices. PBMs dictate the rebate terms and keep the rebates or a portion of the rebates, rather than passing full savings to patients or insurers, resulting in higher insurance premiums. Monopolistic integrations create conditions where PBMs benefit from every step of the process. They negotiate the drug prices, they dictate the reimbursement of pharmacies, and profit off of increased insurance premiums because they also are managing the insurance coverage. On top of all that, they minimize cost saving for all competition. Another area of increased scrutiny is the absolute lack of transparency in how PBMs set prices and retain rebates. While PBMs claim to negotiate lower drug prices, the actual savings passed on to patients and insurers remain unclear. Rebate agreements are confidential. PBMs do not disclose the percentage of rebates they retain versus how much is passed to insurers. Reimbursement rates for pharmacies are arbitrary. Pharmacies often do not know how much they will be reimbursed for dispensing a drug until after the sale, making financial planning difficult. Spread pricing increases costs. PBMs may charge insurers more than they reimburse pharmacies, pocketing the difference. The lack of transparency allows PBMs to extract revenue at multiple points in the drug distribution system, making it difficult to assess where cost savings are actually occurring, or if any cost savings are occurring at all. Given these concerns, policymakers have introduced multiple reforms at both the state and federal levels to address PBM practices. Legislation has been proposed to mandate that PBMs disclose how much of the manufacturer rebates they retain. Some states have banned PBMs from charging insurers more than they reimburse pharmacies for drugs. Certain Medicare reforms aim to ensure that rebates are reflected in lower patient out-of-pocket costs. Laws have been proposed to prevent PBMs from directing patients to their own pharmacies over independent ones. While these reforms could help create a more transparent and competitive system, PBMs continue to adapt their business models to regulatory changes, meaning enforcement and oversight will be key in ensuring meaningful cost reductions for consumers. But how are they able to adapt their business models, and why are these only proposed regulatory changes, and why haven't these changes just been passed? Let's take a closer look and see what we can find. The pharmacy benefit management (PBM) industry is one of the most consolidated markets in healthcare today. This level of concentration means that just 3 companies have significant leverage over drug pricing, pharmacy reimbursement rates, and formulary decisions. When we expand the view to the top 6 PBMs, the control over the market increases even further to 96% of all prescription drug claims. Together, these 6 PBMs dictate nearly all aspects of prescription drug access in the U.S. healthcare system. Many of these companies have vertically integrated with larger corporations that own their own pharmacies, insurance companies, and distribution systems. 5 of the 6 companies are publicly traded. Let's peel this onion one layer deeper and see what else we can find. CVS Caremark, one of the largest PBMs in the U.S., is owned by CVS Health, which also owns Aetna, a major health insurance provider. This integration of insurance, pharmacy retail, and PBM services under a single corporate umbrella represents a significant case of vertical integration. It can influence which drugs are covered, how much they cost, and where prescriptions are filled, This creates a closed-loop system that minimizes outside competition and drives patients insured by Aetna into CVS-owned pharmacies. This type of consolidation limits consumer choice, potentially driving up prices due to reduced market competition. Let's look at who owns CVS Health. The ownership structure of CVS Health is dominated by large institutional investors. These institutional investors are among the largest asset management firms in the world, holding major stakes not just in CVS Health, but also in its competitors and suppliers. Let's consider the following questions. Do the same financial entities influence multiple aspects of the healthcare system, and do they own other major PBMs? If they did, then this raises concerns about potential conflicts of interest and monopolistic market behavior, as financial interests may prioritize financial returns over competition and consumer benefits. Let's take a look at the other institutions and see what we can find. Express Scripts is owned by Cigna Corporation, a major health insurance company. This ownership structure represents another vertically integrated model. Cigna Corporation is largely owned by some of the same big institutional investors. Vanguard and BlackRock are both at the top, but the next three are different from CVS Caremark. Before we start jumping to conclusions, let's take a look at the third largest market share institution. Optum Rx is owned by United Health Group, one of the largest health insurance and healthcare services companies in the United States. United Health Group also owns United Healthcare, one of the country's leading health insurers. United Health Group also operates as a publicly traded company. Okay, so there is Vanguard and BlackRock again. State Street and Fidelity are there too. JP Morgan is new. But how do you know that United Health is really influenced by these investment firms? United Health Group's board of directors includes F. William McNabb III, who served as chairman and CEO of the Vanguard Group, Inc. from 2008 to 2017. There might be a network of financial interests where institutional investors benefit regardless of which PBM dominates. Policymakers and regulators have raised concerns about the role of institutional investors in driving up healthcare costs through monopolistic structures. Let's keep going. Coming in fourth place is Humana. Its structure differentiates it from the other vertically integrated competitors. Humana remains independent from major PBMs and pharmacy chains. This independence allows Humana to engage with multiple PBMs, rather than favoring a single in-house entity for formulary and drug pricing decisions. However, it also means Humana lacks the cost efficiencies that vertically integrated competitors may leverage. Unlike insurer-owned PBMs that have direct control over drug pricing strategies, Humana must balance shareholder demands for growth with healthcare affordability and competitive positioning. There are the same large asset management firm names again. While more independent than the other PBMs, Humana's corporate decisions are still heavily influenced by shareholder expectations of profitability and market competitiveness. Prime Therapeutics is a PBM that is owned by 19 Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, along with their subsidiaries and affiliates. Unlike the three largest PBMs, Prime Therapeutics operates as a cooperative entity, meaning its ownership is directly tied to nonprofit and member-based health insurance organizations rather than a publicly traded corporation. BCBS itself is structured as a federation of 34 independent and locally operated health insurance companies, which means that while they share branding and administrative structures, they are not a singular, publicly traded entity. This decentralized model allows BCBS-affiliated companies to operate with a level of independence while still leveraging shared resources and partnerships, such as their ownership stake in Prime Therapeutics. Despite BCBS's status as a federation, it does have ownership ties to a publicly traded health insurance company, Elevance Health, formerly known as Anthem Inc. Again, the big institutional asset management firms are present. Let's take a look at the sixth and final PBM we are going to look into. MedImpact Healthcare Systems Inc. is a privately held PBM, meaning it is not publicly traded and does not have the same level of shareholder accountability as publicly listed PBMs like CVS Caremark or Express Scripts. The company is primarily controlled by Fred Howe, who serves as its founder, chairman, CEO, and majority shareholder, owning 90% of the company. This level of ownership concentrates decision-making power within a single individual, differentiating MedImpact from other major PBMs that are subject to the influence of multiple corporate stakeholders. Unlike publicly traded PBMs, which must disclose financials and business practices to shareholders and regulatory agencies, MedImpact operates with greater confidentiality. This can limit external accountability, making it more difficult to assess its pricing models and business strategies. But with this ownership comes greater strategic flexibility. Since MedImpact is not beholden to stockholders, it has more autonomy in making business decisions. This means it can pursue long-term strategies rather than focusing on short-term stock performance, which is often a driving factor for publicly traded PBMs. The majority of major health insurance providers are owned by a handful of health corporations, which are then owned by a handful of the largest asset management firms. These are the same companies that control the largest PBMs and pharmacy networks. This consolidation of ownership creates a powerful financial incentive for these companies to maximize shareholder value, often at the expense of cost control for patients. Instead of using PBMs to negotiate lower drug prices, the model has evolved to extract as much revenue as possible from every transaction in the supply chain, from drug manufacturers to insurers to pharmacies, all while patients bear the financial burden. Addressing this issue requires increased regulatory scrutiny, potential antitrust action, and new policies aimed at breaking the financial alignment between PBMs, insurers, and asset managers to restore competition and lower drug prices. Without intervention, the existing structure ensures that patients will continue to pay higher premiums, higher drug costs, and face limited choices in their healthcare options. Thankfully, we live in a democracy in which the people elect politicians and legislatures that will ensure that these monopolistic practices are broken up. We mentioned earlier that there were a number of proposed measures to help protect patients, increase transparency, and restore a patient-first strategy. So why are these just proposals and haven't been voted into law? The 6 largest health corporations engage in lobbying and campaign donations to influence state legislative policies in ways that favor their business interests. The values listed only represent their 2024 contributions to lobbying and political campaign contributions. The percentages are included to show that these corporations operate on both sides of the aisle. In recent years, there has been increased scrutiny of PBMs and Medicare Advantage plans, leading to intensified lobbying activities by major health insurers. Notably, companies have increased their spending on lobbying to address these concerns. In addition to lobbying, these corporations make significant campaign contributions to state legislators. Data from 2024 indicates that 93% of congressional incumbents received contributions from major insurance corporations, including those operating large Medicare Advantage plans. This financial support can lead to legislative outcomes that align with the interests of these corporations, potentially at the expense of broader healthcare reforms. Often the policies proposed by legislatures are drafted by subject matter experts, who also just happen to be provided by these same health corporations. But I mentioned that these health corporations are controlled by large asset managers. Let's just elect politicians that can put forward policies that can manage them, right? Then we will be saved. The largest asset managers' influence extends beyond passive investment. They also actively leverage lobbying efforts and campaign donations to shape healthcare policies that consolidate their market control and maximize profitability across the entire pharmaceutical supply chain. As before, these numbers only represent a single year, 2024, of lobbying and donations. Similarly, they evenly split their attention to both sides of the aisle. Lobbying groups representing these financial institutions and push for legislation that enables further consolidation of PBMs, insurers, and pharmaceutical companies, ensuring that their investments continue to grow in value. They actively oppose antitrust measures that would break up dominant PBMs or limit insurer consolidation. Many state legislators rely heavily on industry donations, making them hesitant to pass laws that would challenge the influence of PBMs and insurers. Asset managers use third-party advocacy groups and healthcare trade organizations to push legislation that benefits their holdings without direct association with the financial firms themselves. State laws regulating PBM are routinely watered down or blocked due to aggressive lobbying efforts. Through lobbying, strategic campaign donations, and legislative influence, they ensure that the system continues to benefit their financial interests, often at the expense of affordability and competition in healthcare. But some bills are getting proposed, though. Let's take a look. State legislatures across the country have taken steps to regulate PBM practices, with a focus on pricing, transparency, and pharmacy network regulations. These regulations aim to counteract anti-competitive behavior, lack of pricing transparency, and discriminatory reimbursement practices. 16 states have banned spread pricing. Colorado, Florida, Arkansas, Indiana, and New York now require PBMs to pass negotiated discounts and rebates directly to health plans or consumers. California, Louisiana, Maine, and New York have enacted laws to impose a duty of care on PBMs. Arkansas, California, Louisiana, Maine, and New York now require PBMs to be licensed by or registered with the state and to report certain information such as drug pricing, fees charged, and the amounts of rebates received and retained. They have also enacted laws prohibiting discrimination against unaffiliated pharmacies and limiting patient copays charged by PBMs. While these state-level reforms are important, PBMs operate across state lines, making federal regulation necessary to fully address these issues. A pivotal Supreme Court ruling in 2020, Rutledge v. Pharmaceutical Care Management Association, upheld state authority to regulate PBM reimbursement practices. The court ruled that ERISA, Employee Retirement Income Security Act, does not preempt state laws regulating PBM reimbursement. The decision confirmed that states have the right to set fair reimbursement rates to ensure independent pharmacies are paid adequately. This ruling opened the door for more aggressive state regulations targeting PBM pricing strategies. The PBM Transparency Act, S.127, addressing hidden costs in the PBM industry, was aimed to increase transparency and eliminate deceptive pricing practices by prohibiting spread pricing, requiring PBMs to report rebate structures, and prevent PBMs from retroactively reducing pharmacy reimbursements. The PBM Reform Act, S.1339, strengthening federal oversight of PBMs, sought to improve federal oversight of PBMs by regulating PBM service fees, ensure transparency in PBM contracts with health plans and insurers, and requires an exception process for patients stuck in step therapy protocols. The Patients Before Middlemen Act, S.1967, eliminating PBM incentives to favor high-priced drugs, aimed to change how PBMs are compensated in Medicare Part D by banning PBMs from earning profits based on drug prices, rebates, or volume in Medicare and shifting PBM revenue to a flat service fee model. The Patient Act, H.R. 3561, expanding transparency in healthcare pricing, focused on enhancing healthcare pricing transparency by expanding hospital price transparency requirements and mandated transparency in PBM drug pricing and reimbursement structures, as well as funding healthcare programs, including the National Health Service Corps and community health centers. Unfortunately, all of these proposals that made it out of committee were not voted on. Therefore, on the 3rd of January, all of these proposals expired with the adjournment of the 118th Congress. Each of them would have to pass through committee again and be reintroduced into the 119th Congress, and hopefully can be moved forward and voted on. As Netflix threw off the shackles of video store rentals and their terrible late fees, a wave of disruptive business models is challenging the status quo, offering patients and insurers alternative ways to access medications without the layers of opaque pricing and rebate retention practices that PBMs rely on. GoodRx acts as a price comparison tool and discount provider, bypassing the PBM rebate system and giving patients direct access to lower prices on medications at participating pharmacies. Amazon Pharmacy integrates prescription fulfillment with its existing e-commerce and Prime membership model, leveraging scale to offer low-cost medications and seamless home delivery. Mark Cuban's Cost Plus drug company uses a radical transparency model that provides direct-to-consumer generic medications at a fixed 15% markup over wholesale prices, plus a $3 pharmacy fee and $5 for shipping. Retail chains like Walmart and Kroger have long offered PBM-free cash pricing models, with select generic drugs available for as little as $4 per month. Drug manufacturers of insulin are reducing their prices. For years, PBMs have favored high-list-price/high rebate drugs, which disproportionately affected insulin pricing. In response to public pressure and policy changes, insulin manufacturers lowered list prices by up to 75%, significantly impacting PBM revenue streams. This will hopefully break the high-list-price/high rebate cycle that PBMs have exploited for profit. These actions undermine PBM negotiating power, as rebates no longer justify higher list prices, and it forces PBMs to justify their existence when transparent pricing from manufacturers eliminates the need for complex reimbursement structures. Walmart partnered with Novo Nordisk to create a private label insulin product, offering lower-priced alternatives to brand-name insulins without the PBM rebate system. This cuts PBMs out of the supply chain entirely and offers cost savings directly to consumers, which removes the spread pricing tactics PBMs rely on. In one of the most significant challenges to PBM dominance, Blue Shield of California announced in 2023 that it was ending its reliance on CVS Caremark and instead partnering with Amazon Pharmacy, Mark Cuban Cost Plus drug company, and Abarca Health for claims processing. This cuts traditional PBMs out of the equation entirely and directly competes with existing PBM mail-order services, as Amazon Pharmacy replaces CVS Caremark's role in drug fulfillment. The growing adoption of alternative pricing models and direct-to-consumer options is putting unprecedented pressure on PBMs, but large healthcare corporations and large asset management funds still maintain a monopolistic control over the entire industry through aggressive business practices, lobbying, and political influence. After hearing all this and pulling back the curtain of the PBM industry, an overwhelming feeling of hopelessness begins to set in. Is it hopeless? Are we forever doomed to pay higher and higher premiums, co-pays, and absurdly high drug costs? Let's look at this hopelessness next. Let's back up for a second and set the stage. The Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, ERISA, is federal law that was enacted to protect employees' retirement savings by imposing strict fiduciary responsibilities on those who manage private sector retirement plans. These responsibilities are meant to ensure that retirement plans are operated in the best interest of plan participants, free from conflicts of interest, excessive fees, or imprudent investments. In short, it ensures that employees' retirement funds are managed responsibly and without unnecessary costs or risks. The law applies to employers, plan administrators, trustees, and investment managers, all of whom are considered fiduciaries under ERISA. ERISA imposes 5 core fiduciary duties on retirement plan managers under Section 404(a)(1). Duty of loyalty. Fiduciaries must act exclusively for the benefit of plan participants and their beneficiaries. Duty of prudence. Fiduciaries must make sound investment choices, thoroughly vet plan options, and monitor investments regularly. Duty of reasonableness. Fiduciaries must ensure record-keeping, administrative, and investment fees are reasonable and competitive. Duty to diversify. Fiduciaries must provide a well-balanced investment lineup to minimize unnecessary risks. Duty to follow plan terms. Plan administrators must operate strictly according to the plan's rules and federal regulations. When fiduciaries fail to uphold their responsibilities, they can be sued by employees, retirees, or regulatory agencies. ERISA, Section 502A, gives plan participants the right to bring legal action against fiduciaries for mismanagement or financial losses. These lawsuits fall into 4 main categories. Excessive fee lawsuits. Employers and plan administrators are often sued for allowing high administrative and investment fees that reduce retirement savings. Poor investment selection and monitoring. Fiduciaries must continuously evaluate fund performance and cost-effectiveness. Conflicts of interest and self-dealing. Fiduciaries cannot choose investments that benefit themselves or third parties at the expense of employees. Failure to diversify investments. Plans must spread risk across different investments rather than over-concentrating in a single asset. Why am I talking about employee retirement and lawsuits? Just wait a minute, I'll get there. Just bear with me a bit longer. Over the past decade, ERISA litigation has surged, with more than $1 billion in settlements for 401(k) mismanagement cases. To protect themselves from lawsuits, employers must take a proactive role in managing their employees' retirement plans and must act in the best interest of employees. A whole industry of ERISA lawyers and law firms grew from this piece of legislation. These law firms aggressively pursue large employers, looking for major class action lawsuits, leading to multi-million-dollar to billion-dollar settlements. And even recent Supreme Court rulings have even lowered the bar for employees to sue fiduciaries. One of these ERISA law firms is Fairmark Partners, LLP. They have closed huge settlements against Johnson & Johnson, Wells Fargo, and JP Morgan Chase. For now, though, just tuck that name, Fairmark Partners, LLP, away in the back of your mind for a hot minute. Now that the stage is set, let's jump forward a few years. The year is 2020. A dark cloud looms over the nation. The streets, once bustling with life, are now eerily silent. The hum of commerce has died down, replaced by uncertainty, fear, and the ceaseless sirens of ambulances rushing through desolate cityscapes. Millions of Americans sit in their homes, their livelihoods vanishing like smoke in the wind. The economy, once a roaring engine of prosperity, has sputtered and stalled. In Washington, the halls of power stir with an urgent mission. Salvation must come, and it must come swiftly. Faced with an economic collapse of historic proportions, Congress moved with rare urgency. Partisan lines, often drawn like battlefronts, blurred into the desperate need to act. From the depths of chaos, a bill emerged, a beacon of hope in a time of despair. The CARES Act, a colossal piece of legislation, thuds onto the desk, its pages thick with promises. Its name, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act, is both a lifeline and a gamble. $2 trillion, a sum so vast, it could have seemed unfathomable. But the crisis demanded nothing less. Stimulus checks for the struggling, lifelines for small businesses on the brink, protections for the unemployed, whose futures now hung by a thread, and aid for hospitals, the front lines of an invisible war. And so, on the fateful day of March 27, 2020, the pen met the paper, ink flowed, sealing a pact between the government and its people. The CARES Act was now law. However, it was clear. This was merely the first chapter in a long and grueling battle. The storm had not passed. The economy continued to suffer, and with each passing month, the fractures widened. With time, the CARES Act's provisions began to expire. The unemployed faced a terrifying future with no safety net. Businesses, already gasping for breath, collapsed into bankruptcy. Millions were on the verge of eviction, their livelihoods in tatters. Meanwhile, in Washington, the battle lines were drawn. Negotiations for a second relief package became a political battlefield. Accusations flew like arrows. Some said more relief was needed immediately. Others warned that such spending would doom future generations to unspeakable debt. In an act of sheer political survival, the process of a second omnibus relief package was started on July 6th, and in one of the shortest periods of legislation, it was rushed to finalize. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, a behemoth of legislation, spanning 5,593 pages, the longest bill ever passed in U.S. history. It was a bill of necessity, compromise, and some would argue political theater. It was one of the biggest sausage bills in U.S. history. Nobody in Congress knew all the things that had been shoved into it. Did anybody in Congress even bother to read it? Why would they? It had what they wanted in it. It contained provisions for a Smithsonian American Women's History Museum and National Museum of the American Latino. It contained a Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, a formal statement supporting the right of Tibetan Buddhists to choose the Dalai Lama's successor without interference, climate policy measures to phase down hydrofluorocarbons. It contained enhancements to copyright protections, including increased penalties for illegal streaming services and even restoration of Sudan's sovereign immunity. But there it was, Sections 201, 202, and 204. Who had done this? Who had snuck these sections into the CAA? Nobody stepped forward to take responsibility, and in the 11th hour, there it was. Section 201. ERISA was amended to increase transparency in group health plans. And new Section 724 was added, prohibiting so-called gag clauses in contracts between health plans and providers or administrators. This means that employers and plan sponsors who are fiduciaries under ERISA can no longer be blocked from accessing and sharing critical data. This includes de-identified claims, pricing, provider performance, and service details. Importantly, fiduciaries must now act on this information and annually attest to the Department of Labor that their contracts do not contain gag clauses. This heightens their legal obligation under ERISA to act prudently and in the best interest of participants by using transparent, actionable healthcare data. In short, this reform doesn't just open the books. It raises the bar on fiduciary responsibility. Employers must ensure full data access and must act on it in ways that prioritize plan participants. Section 202. ERISA was amended to establish mandatory disclosure rules for brokers and consultants working with employer-sponsored group health plans. Any service provider such as a broker, consultant, or affiliated entity who expects to receive $1,000 or more in direct or indirect compensation must disclose, in writing, what services they'll provide and how they'll be paid. This ensures the plan fiduciary has enough information to determine whether the arrangement is reasonable and free from conflicts of interest. Second, the amendment defines key roles and terms, including covered service provider, affiliate, subcontractor, and most importantly, responsible plan fiduciary. Under the law, a responsible plan fiduciary is any individual with the authority to cause the plan to enter into, extend, or renew a service contract. This means employers and plan sponsors, those who make decisions about plan vendors, are now explicitly held to the fiduciary standard under ERISA when selecting and overseeing these providers. Third, the law outlines strict requirements for the timing and format of disclosures. Covered service providers must share all relevant compensation information in advance of entering into or renewing a contract. They must also update fiduciaries within 60 days if anything changes, and furnish additional data upon request to meet ERISA's reporting and disclosure standards. And fourth, the amendment includes enforcement and protection provisions. If a service provider fails to disclose required information, fiduciaries can request it in writing. If the provider still doesn't respond within 90 days, the fiduciary must notify the Department of Labor. In some cases, the fiduciary may be required to terminate the contract. However, contracts won't automatically be considered unlawful if the provider made a good faith mistake and corrected it within 30 days. This amendment to ERISA raises the bar for transparency and places a clear fiduciary duty on employers and plan sponsors, reinforcing their responsibility to act in the best interest of plan participants. Section 204. ERISA was amended by adding Section 725, which significantly expands fiduciary responsibilities for employers and health plan sponsors. Under this new provision, group health plans are now required to report detailed data each year to the Departments of Labor, Health and Human Services, and the Treasury. This includes the top 50 most used and most costly prescription drugs, the drugs with the largest price increases, total healthcare spending, and the impact of manufacturer rebates on premiums and out-of-pocket costs. Importantly, this amendment makes employers fiduciaries not only over retirement plans, but now also over how pharmacy benefits and drug costs are managed within health plans. They are responsible for ensuring the accuracy, transparency, and reasonableness of the compensation and financial arrangements tied to drug pricing, PBM services, and benefit design. In short, this change brings fiduciary liability into the domain of pharmacy and health benefit reporting, holding employers and plan sponsors accountable for ensuring these plans act in the best interests of beneficiaries. These sections significantly expand the fiduciary responsibilities under ERISA. First, under Section 201, fiduciaries must now ensure transparency in healthcare pricing and quality data. If they fail to obtain or share this data, they may be held liable for breaching their duty of prudence and loyalty. Section 202 increases scrutiny over broker and consultant compensation. Fiduciaries are now required to assess whether these compensation arrangements are reasonable. If they don't get full disclosures or ignore conflicts of interest, they open themselves up to prohibited transaction claims. Section 204 adds another layer. fiduciaries must report extensive drug cost and rebate data annually. Failing to do so, or misreporting, could show a failure to act solely in the interest of plan participants. So why does this matter? Because these duties now reach beyond investment oversight of retirement plans. Fiduciaries are directly accountable for third-party administrator relationships, vendor compensation, and plan cost structure. And here's the key. These changes give employees a stronger legal foundation to bring class action lawsuits against their employers under ERISA. To file a lawsuit, they need to show a fiduciary breach, economic harm, and that the issue affects a broad group like inflated premiums or hidden fees. If successful, fiduciaries can face serious liability. Bottom line, these changes raise the bar for fiduciary conduct and significantly increase the legal risks for employers and health insurance plan administrators. If an employer does not demand transparency and fails to meet these duties and responsibilities and deliver a health insurance plan to their employees, then all employees that are hurt by this mismanagement can now collectively join together in a class action lawsuit. And where does the downfall of all of humanity start? In every great zombie apocalypse movie. With patient zero, one lawsuit, one crack in the dam, and ERISA attorneys will have their patient zero. And when they do, that lawsuit won't stand alone. It'll multiply plan by plan, employer by employer. We're not just talking lawsuits. We're talking mega class actions, sweeping, precedent-setting, treasury-draining litigation that will redefine fiduciary responsibility in America. And the fiduciaries that can be held liable? The CEO, the CFO, the HR execs, the benefits officers, the third-party administrators. All of them are liable. Most of these executives and officers don't know that a quiet army is forming on the horizon. And it may just be the most terrifying army in history. Not an army of undead. Worse, this horde of veterans. More than 50 years they've trained and honed their craft. This unspeakable terror is an army of lawyers. For employees, they may just be the riders of Rohan. For others, they will be the army of Sauron. They won't see it coming until it's too late. Why won't they hear it? Why won't news outlets cover it? Who funds news outlets' advertising? Who do we know that owns large portions of stocks? Who has seats at the board of directors? Who can you imagine wants to keep things quiet for as long as they can? So when you hear about a small claims dispute or a denied access to plan pricing data, I am telling you, don't ignore it. It might not be a fire, but it just might be the spark. Now, I told you to remember a name. Don't worry if you forgot it. Who do we know that has had a track record of winning major class action lawsuits that deal with ERISA? That name, Fairmark Partners LLP, and they may have just found their patient zero, Ann Lewandowski. Ann Lewandowski was no stranger to the healthcare system. As Johnson & Johnson's advocacy director for Wisconsin and Minnesota, she worked to promote policies that made medications more affordable and accessible. Ironically, it's that mission that led her to become the face of a groundbreaking ERISA lawsuit. After being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, Ann discovered her J&J health plan was paying $1,629 for a 90-day supply of a generic HIV antiviral drug, more than 700% above the drug's actual acquisition cost of around $181, and far higher than the $200 cash price available at retail pharmacies. She believed this wasn't just wasteful, it was a breach of fiduciary duty. In February 2024, with the help of Fairmark Partners LLP, she filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the District of New Jersey. Her claims were bold, that J&J and its health plan fiduciaries failed to prudently negotiate their PBM contract, ignored more cost-effective pricing models like pass-through arrangements, and failed to monitor spread pricing, where PBMs keep massive profits by billing health plans far more than they reimburse pharmacies. The result? According to Ann, plan participants like her ended up paying inflated premiums, excessive out-of-pocket costs, and suffering reduced wage growth, all while J&J's fiduciaries turned a blind eye. But Judge Zahid Qureshi partially dismissed the lawsuit, not because the allegations lacked merit, but because Ann failed to demonstrate Article 3 standing. Her claims of injury such as higher premiums and early fulfillment of her $3,500 annual out-of-pocket maximum were deemed either too speculative or not redressable under law. The judge explained that even if J&J had to repay her, that money wouldn't go to Ann, it would go back to the insurance carrier. However, one claim survived: J&J's failure to provide ERISA-mandated plan documents within 30 days of her written request, a clear procedural violation under Section 104(b)(2). That count is moving forward. The court dismissed the two main claims without prejudice, giving Ann 30 days to amend her complaint. Legal experts expect her legal team will bolster the case by adding plaintiffs who do have standing and potentially by expanding the allegations of fiduciary breach. With growing scrutiny over PBM practices and upcoming cases like the one against Wells Fargo, which includes a prohibited transaction claim, the legal ground is shifting. Ann's case may not have cracked the system wide open, but it's the first strike, a blueprint for future ERISA litigation. If the next plaintiff shows standing, the door could swing wide for class actions, challenging how America's largest employers manage their prescription drug plans. This isn't just about one drug or one plaintiff. It's about the fiduciary responsibility to act solely in the interest of plan participants and the price of violating that trust. Following the filing of the Johnson & Johnson case, a second major ERISA lawsuit was filed, this time against Wells Fargo. In Navarro v. Wells Fargo, former employees claimed the bank and its trustees violated their fiduciary duties by mismanaging the company's prescription drug benefit plan. At the center of the case is the plan's pharmacy benefit manager, Express Scripts. Plaintiffs allege that Wells Fargo failed to negotiate reasonable drug prices or monitor the PBM's practices, resulting in massive markups, like paying over $9,900 for a drug that could be bought for under $650 at retail. Another drug was priced 2,400% higher under the plan than at local pharmacies. What makes this case unique is that the Wells Fargo health plan is funded through a VBABA trust, which makes it easier to prove that both the company and Express Scripts were acting as ERISA fiduciaries. That means they were legally obligated to act solely in the best interest of plan participants, with care, skill, and prudence. The lawsuit accuses Wells Fargo of failing to detect conflicts of interest, overpaying for drugs, and ignoring more transparent alternatives like pass-through PBMs. Although Express Scripts isn't named in the lawsuit, likely due to an arbitration clause, its role as a fiduciary may still come under legal scrutiny. Still, Wells Fargo is expected to challenge the case, arguing the plaintiffs weren't significantly harmed, and that overall, the plan may have saved money despite high prices for certain drugs. Ultimately, this case, alongside the J&J suit, signals a new era of litigation. These ERISA lawsuits are highlighting serious flaws in our healthcare system. Now pressure is mounting to change that. Just last September, the ERISA Industry Committee (ERIC) released a powerful issue brief, calling on Congress to officially classify PBMs as fiduciaries under ERISA. Why? Because today's unregulated PBM industry can boost its own profits at the expense of employees and their families, with practices like spread pricing and rebate retention driving up costs. ERIC's message is clear. If PBMs are acting on behalf of health plans, they should be held to the same fiduciary standard, putting participants' best interests first. The brief even includes case studies showing how ignoring cost-saving options like biosimilars impacts drug prices. This push for reform has broad backing. Employer coalitions, bipartisan lawmakers, and over 80 organizations have urged Congress to apply fiduciary duties to PBMs and demand transparency, accountability, and real cost control. If successful, this shift could mark a new era of accountability in prescription drug management and fundamentally change how ERISA governs employer-sponsored healthcare. If Anne Lewandowski wins her case against Johnson & Johnson, and if Sergio Navarro and the plaintiffs succeed against Wells Fargo, it could be a watershed moment for employee health benefits. These lawsuits argue that employers violated their fiduciary duties under ERISA by overpaying for prescription drugs through poorly managed PBM contracts. If the courts agree, it would set a powerful legal precedent and invite a wave of similar lawsuits across the country. Even if they lose, their efforts won't be in vain. They're blazing the trail, creating a blueprint for future ERISA claims and shining a light on hidden costs that impact millions of employees. Others will stand on their shoulders, armed with sharper strategies and stronger claims. If, in response, PBMs are officially deemed ERISA fiduciaries, the industry will shift fast. Employers will renegotiate contracts, remove spread pricing, demand rebate transparency, and conduct regular audits. They'll rework plan designs to reduce legal exposure and seek out new vendors who prioritize value and transparency. Ultimately, these cases, win or lose, are forcing a long-overdue reckoning. They're sending a clear message. The era of opaque pharmacy pricing is coming to an end, and for the companies who fail to act, the legal and financial risks will only grow. These rules don't automatically apply to government officials or agencies. That's because Section 4(b)(1) of ERISA explicitly exempts governmental plans from most ERISA provisions, including fiduciary duties. This means that federal, state, and local government officials administering public employee health plans generally cannot be held liable under these new fiduciary rules, even after the 2021 updates. That said, there are exceptions. Government officials may be held liable under ERISA if the plan loses its governmental status, for example, if it begins covering private employees, or if a third-party administrator is acting on behalf of the government plan and crosses the line into discretionary decision-making, which could make them a functional fiduciary under ERISA. So while ERISA reach doesn't typically extend to public plans, oversight gaps and missteps, especially involving PBMs, could still open the door to legal challenges under certain conditions. My recommendation: get informed, speak with your benefits manager and a lawyer if you think necessary, and keep an ear out for the final verdict of these cases. They are the trumpets of the riders of Rohan. While I am not holding my breath that one day large healthcare corporations are going to wake up and slash their prices out of the goodness of their heart, change is coming. It may be slow, it may be painful, and despite all the lobbying and political campaign contributions, I do feel a little bit better knowing that there are staffers or congressmen out there that are sneaking bits of legislation into bills here and there, and these little bits create cracks in the bulwark of a system that often feels rigged against us. If you made it all the way to the end, I am truly grateful for your time and attention. I tried to do my best to collect, analyze, and include the key bits of information that I thought most relevant. If I made mistakes, which I am sure that I did, add a message below, and I will do better next time. If you want to chat with me about this, add a comment below too. Full disclosure, I am not a lawyer, I am not a rider of Rohan, or a goblin in Sauron's army. If you liked this video, or if you found it helpful in understanding this topic, I would be thrilled if you shared it with someone else you think might find it interesting too. Otherwise, thank you again for your time and attention.